Benazir Bhutto, Daughter of Destiny. About the author. Benazir Bhutto was the Prime Minister of Pakistan and the chairperson of the Pakistan People's Party. Born in 1953 in Karachi, Bhutto was the first woman to lead a post-colonial Muslim state. She served as Prime Minister of Pakistan from 1988 to 1990 and from 1993 to 1996. Bhutto is the author of Reconciliation, Islam, Democracy, and the West. She lived in exile beginning in 1999 and returned to Pakistan in October 2007, 2 months before her assassination. The book is dedicated to Bilawal, Bakhtwar, and Asifa, and all of the children of Pakistan. Preface to the new edition. I didn't choose this life, it chose me. Born in Pakistan, my life mirrors its turbulence, its tragedies, and its triumphs. Once again, Pakistan is in the international spotlight. Terrorists who use the name of Islam threaten its stability. The democratic forces believe terrorism can be eliminated by promoting the principles of freedom. A military dictatorship plays a dangerous game of deception and intrigue. Fearful of losing power, it dithers, keeping the forces of modernization at bay while the flames of terrorism flourish. Pakistan is no ordinary country, and mine has been no ordinary life. My father and two brothers were killed. My mother, husband, and I were all imprisoned. I have spent long years in exile. Despite the difficulties and sorrows, however, I feel blessed. I feel blessed that I could break the bastions of traditions by becoming Islam's first elected woman prime minister. That election was a tipping point in the debate raging in the Muslim world on the role of women in Islam. It proved that a Muslim woman could be elected prime minister, could govern a country, and could be accepted as a leader by both men and women. I'm grateful to the people of Pakistan for honoring me. And while the debate between the modernizers and the extremists continues, women across the Muslim world have made great strides since I first took the oath of office on December 2nd, 1988. Few in this world are given the privilege to effect change in society, to bring the modern era to a country that had only the most basic infrastructure, to break down stereotypes about the role of women, and ultimately to give hope for change to millions who had no hope before. It's not necessarily the life I would have chosen, but it has been a life of opportunity, responsibility, and fulfillment. And I sense that the future holds still more challenges that must be met for my country, Pakistan, and myself. 20 years ago, in light of the developments in my life, my father's assassination, my imprisonment, the responsibility of picking up his political mantle, I had little expectation of finding personal happiness, of finding love, marriage, and of having children. Like England's Queen Elizabeth I, who had also endured imprisonment and remained single, I thought I would never get married. Yet my personal life defied these narrow expectations. I found joy and fulfillment in marriage despite difficult circumstances. I'm proud of my husband for his courage and loyalty in standing by my side through 19 years of marriage. During these years, he lived either in the Prime Minister's house or as a political prisoner held hostage to my career, and I found our relationship strengthened despite the physical separation and the attempts to turn us against each other. No, life isn't what I would have predicted, but I don't think I would have changed places with any woman in history. I am a woman proud of my cultural and religious heritage. I feel a special personal obligation to contrast the true Islam, the religion of tolerance and pluralism, with the caricature of my faith that terrorists have hijacked. I know that I am a symbol of what the so-called Taliban and Al-Qaeda most fear. I am a female political leader fighting to bring modernity, community, education, and technology to Pakistan. I believe that a democratic Pakistan can become a symbol of hope to more than 1 billion Muslims around the world who must choose between the forces of the past and the forces of the future. The political battles that I fought were always for an end. The goals centered on liberty and social justice, and those values are definitely worth fighting for. But I do believe my career has been more challenging because I am a woman. Clearly, it's not easy for women in modern society, no matter where we live. We still have to go the extra mile to prove that we are equal to men. We have to work longer hours and make more sacrifices, and we must emotionally protect ourselves from unfair, often vicious attacks made on us via the male members of our family. Sadly, many still believe that men control the women in their lives, and by pressuring the man, they will get him to pressure the women. Nevertheless, we must be prepared not to complain about the double standards, but to overcome them. We must be prepared to do so even if it means working twice as hard and twice as long as a man. I'm grateful to my mother for teaching me that pregnancy is a biological state of being which should not disrupt the normal routine of life. Trying to live up to her expectations, I almost ignored any hint of physical or emotional limitation during my pregnancies. Yet I was acutely conscious that what should have been a family matter became a topic of intense political discussion from military headquarters to editorial boards. Aware of this, I kept the exact details of my pregnancies confidential. I was lucky to have good medical care through Dr. Freddie Setna, who ensured my visits remained private. I have three lovely children, Bilawal, Bakhtuar, and Asifa. They gave me much joy and pride. When I was expecting my first child, Bilawal, in 1988, the then military dictator dismissed the parliament and called for general elections. He and his top army men believed a pregnant woman could not campaign. They were wrong. I could, and I did. I went on to win the elections held shortly after Bilawal's birth on September 21st, 1988. Bilawal's birth was one of the happiest days of my life. Winning those elections that year, despite predictions that a Muslim woman could not win the hearts and minds of her people, was another. Shortly after I was elected prime minister, my mother told me to hurry up and have another child. She believed that a mother should quickly have children before she realized the challenges of raising a family and fulfilling other responsibilities. I took her advice. While my second pregnancy was still a secret, my army generals decided to take me to the Siachen Glaciers, the highest point in Pakistan, for a military briefing. Pakistan and India had nearly gone to war over Siachen in 1987 and nearly went to war again over them in 1999. I was worried that the lack of oxygen on those glacier peaks could adversely affect my unborn child. My doctor assured me that I could go. Lack of oxygen, he explained, first affects the mother, who can then be given an oxygen mask. The child, he said, would be safe. So, with much trepidation, despite the assurances, I went. It was a great morale booster for our troops to see their prime minister with them on the Siachen Glacier heights, and it was a splendid sight. All around us was the whiteness of the icy glaciers, which melted seamlessly into the blueness of the skies. The absence of earthly noise on those snowy peaks gave a new meaning to heavenly silence. Across the divide, I could see the Indian military posts. They proved that the appearance of peace could be deceptive. Once the political opposition learned I was pregnant, all hell broke loose. They called on the president and the military to overthrow me. They argued that Pakistan's government rules did not provide for a pregnant prime minister going on maternity leave. They said that during delivery I would be incapacitated, and therefore the government's machinery would irretrievably break down for that period of time. This to them was unconstitutional, necessitating the president, backed by the military, dismiss the prime minister and install an interim government to hold new elections. I rejected the opposition's demands, noting that maternity rules existed in the law for working women. My father had legislated maternity leave. I argued that the law implicitly applied to a prime minister even if not stated in the rules for conducting government business. The members of my government stood by me, noting that when a male leader was indisposed, it did not translate into a constitutional crisis, nor should it were a female leader indisposed. Hardly mollified, the opposition drew up a plan of strikes to pressure the president into sacking the government. I had to make my own plans. My father had taught me that in politics, timing is very important. I consulted my doctor, who assured me that my child was full term, and with his permission decided to have a cesarean delivery on the eve of the call for strike action. I didn't want to encourage any stereotypes that pregnancy interferes with performance, so despite my condition, I worked just as hard, and probably a lot harder, than a male prime minister would have. In the end, I chaired a meeting of my cabinet in the capital, and then left for Karachi. I woke up early in the morning and with a friend left for the hospital in her car. It was a small car, very different from the black Mercedes used for official duties. The police on security duty hardly gave it a second glance. They concentrated on cars entering my home rather than those leaving it. My heart was beating fast as we raced to the hospital, where Dr. Setna was waiting for us. I could see the surprise on the faces of the hospital staff as I got out of the car. I knew the news would begin to spread fast through the mobile phones and pagers my government had introduced. We were the first country in South Asia and the Middle East to have mobile phones. I hurried down the hallway to the operating theater. I knew that my husband and mother would be on their way, as we had discussed earlier. As soon as I began To wake from the mist of anesthesia as my hospital trolley was wheeled from the theater to the private room, I heard my husband say, "It's a girl." I saw my mother's face beam with pleasure. I called my daughter Bakhtuar, which means the one who brings good fortune, and she did. The strikes fizzled out and the opposition's movement collapsed. I received thousands of messages of congratulations from all over the world. Heads of government and ordinary people wrote to me, sharing the joy. Especially for young women, it was a defining moment, proving a woman could work and have a baby in the highest and most challenging leadership positions. The next day, I was back on the job, reading government papers and signing government files. Only later did I learn that I was the only head of government in recorded history to actually give birth while in office. That's one less glass ceiling for women prime ministers in the future to have to break. Bakhtuar was born in January 1990. 7 months later, on August 6th, the president undemocratically dismissed my government while world attention was diverted by Iraq's occupation of Kuwait. My husband was arrested, and my mother suggested I send my children abroad. It was heart-rending for me to be parted from Baliwal, who had turned 2 in September 1990, and Bakhtuar, who was not yet 1. My sister, who lives in London, lovingly took them into her home. My in-laws chipped in too by shifting to London. Back at home, I had nightmares where I heard my children cry for me. My sister would tell me not to worry during our many phone conversations, yet those dreams never stopped. With the sacking of my government, the port city of Karachi was gripped by anarchy and chaos. Terrorism was rampant. Innocent civilians were massacred while riding in public transport or outside their homes or in their offices. I knew it was safer for my children to be in London, yet I found it hard to sleep night after night, only to wake with those nightmares. My mother and I were now living largely in the capital city of Islamabad. My husband, elected to parliament in the 1990 elections, was also kept under house arrest in our residence during parliamentary sessions. I confided to my mother and husband how draining it was for me that the children were living away from me. I felt I was abandoning them and worried that it would hurt their emotional well-being and growth. In 1991, Baliwal had started attending a pre-kindergarten school in London's Queen's Gate area. Bakhtuar was still only 1 year old. I could keep her hidden safely in our house in Pakistan, I reasoned. I flew to London and could hardly wait to get to my sister Sanam's flat. As soon as I knocked on her door, I heard my daughter crying, the same cry that had sounded in my dreams. I quickly gathered her in my arms and pulled my son towards me. "I've decided to take Bakhtuar back with me," I told my sister. She was relieved. "I didn't want to upset you," she said, "but that child has not stopped crying for months." Without words being spoken, it seemed that both children knew what was to come. I shall never forget, as long as I live, the sight of Bilawal sitting in his white shirt, blue striped trousers, white socks, and black shoes on the floor of the corridor with his back against the wall. He was staring at me silently and stoically, with the saddest brown eyes in the world, as I took Bakhtuar with me and left him behind. No mother should ever have to leave her 2-year-old son behind. No child should ever feel his mother has taken one child with her and left the other behind. Holding Bakhtuar in my arms, I drove to Heathrow. She lay quietly in my embrace. I boarded the Pakistan International Airlines and sat in my seat. Throughout the 9-hour flight, Bakhtuar did not cry once. She nestled her face on my shoulder and slept. Pakistan's legendary musical artist, Madam Noorjahan, was also on the flight. Sitting next to me, she marveled at this wonderful baby who was not giving her mother any trouble at all. "I've never seen a baby this quiet on a flight in my life," she said. My father-in-law and his wife decided to stay in London so that they could share taking care of Baliwal with my sister. I'm comforted that Baliwal had family with him who diverted his attention with walks in Hyde Park, feeding the ducks and squirrels. With the fall of the Pakistan People's Party (PPP) government in 1990, the election campaign, the separation from my child, the witch hunt against my party and my family, I'd lost a lot of weight. In the spring of 1992, I found I was expecting another baby. As one of our 4 children, it gave me great pleasure to know our family would grow. Yet it was a time of uncertainty. An army operation had been ordered in Karachi. The ethnic party called the Muhajir Qawmi Movement, MQM, unleashed a bloodbath. The Nawaz government accused it of conspiring to break up the country and form a separate state by the name of Jinnapur. The army released maps of the proposed state of Jinnapur as the military crackdown began. But most citizens, fed up with civil strife and bloodshed, were relieved that the MQM state within a state was to be undone. As the army tanks moved in and bulldozed the multiple gates at the mouth of streets erected by the MQM to keep people locked in, Pakistan plunged into a deeper crisis. The Prime Minister was enamored with the Saudi system of government. He wanted to turn Pakistan into a theocratic state and rammed a bill through parliament aimed at strengthening clerical rule in the country. My party checkmated that bill in the Senate, but the clock was ticking. By 1994, the Prime Minister would have a majority in the Senate. He would then Islamicize Pakistan. The attempts to turn Pakistan into theocracy were opposed by the majority of Pakistanis. They were wedded to the secular concept envisaged by the founder of Pakistan, Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah. However, powerful elements in the military backed the prime minister, who would gain a two-thirds majority in the lower house of the parliament with their support. Fiscal irresponsibility had played havoc with the lives of ordinary citizens. Power shutdowns that had been eliminated by the PPP government reappeared. Corruption scandals hit the newspaper headlines. Across the border in India, the Bombay blast had aggravated relations between the two countries. Islamabad was blamed by New Delhi for the attacks. The first attack on the World Trade Center in New York in 1993 had taken place. Pakistan was on the verge of being declared a terrorist state. The opposition parties came together in a grand alliance known as the Pakistan Democratic Alliance (PDA) and called for a protest meeting in Rawalpindi on November 18, 1992. I was so thin, no one suspected that I was to have a baby. Despite the weight loss, or perhaps because of it, I felt healthy and energetic. Our protest call had re-energized me. People across the country responded to it. From the four corners of Pakistan, caravans were getting ready to move to Rawalpindi in a display of people's power. The aim was to restore democracy, stop theocracy, and address the bread and butter issues of the people. On the eve of the protest meeting, we heard that the regime had decided to use brute force to stop us from gathering. That means the regime might use tear gas, I said to my political secretary, Nahid Khan. I was worried for my baby. Nahid went out to arrange eye goggles for us. Someone promised face masks similar to those used by the army, but they failed to show up the next morning, so we took wet towels with us. A crowd had gathered outside my house overnight. The next morning, we awoke to a barbed wire barrier around the house. As I left my front gate with party leaders, we were baton charged. Party members were hit while trying to protect me as they attempted to climb over the barbed wire. A small group of us managed to cross the barbed wire, find a vehicle, and make our way towards Rawalpindi from Islamabad. Periodically, we would come across police vehicles looking for us, and we would drive slowly with our heads down to prevent identification. We lost one van that got tangled up with barbed wire. There were few vehicles on the blockaded roads. We hailed one. It belonged to a sympathizer. He gave us the jeep. Eventually, Malik Qasim, leader of the PLM Qasim group, Air Marshal Asghar Khan, President Foreign Minister Khurshid Kasuri, my political secretary Nahid Khan, her husband Senator Safdar Abbasi, and my secretary security officer Munawwar Suhrawardi, who was assassinated in 2004, found ourselves in the jeep together. The barbed wire blockades were only around Islamabad. Once we entered Rawalpindi and its small streets, a cry of joy went up from the people. They started crowding our vehicles, shouting slogans. We made it to Liaquat Baghpar Park in Rawalpindi, where our meeting was scheduled. Later, the police told me that when a report was sent to them of my presence in Rawalpindi, they laughed it off. But within minutes, they received so many calls that they decided to check it out for themselves. They found their reports were correct. Now a mad chase started in the Rawalpindi streets. Our single jeep was tear gassed from all sides. Police sirens were blaring away. There was pandemonium. The car chase was like something from a James Bond movie, or perhaps more like a Bollywood movie. The crowd kept coming between the police cars and our jeep. The police would lob tear gas shells, get out in their ninja-like uniforms, and start baton charging the crowds to disperse them. As the tear gas shells exploded and smoke billowed out, we would reverse direction or drive over the sidewalk and take another street. The crowd was cheering us on, their slogans filling the air. More and more police reinforcements were called in, and different streets blocked with police cars and vans. Now the police were lobbing tear gas directly as the car windscreen and aiming at us. The windscreens cracked. Finally, our driver had enough. He braked, jumped out of the car, and melted into the shadows. The police surrounded the car and arrested all of us. Later, we realized, but the day's events had weakened the regime. Although the two may be unconnected, after this tear gassing incident, I began suffering from gallbladder pain. I took homeopathic medicine, but the pain continued. It was often excruciating. If I had an operation to fix it, I risked losing my child. I didn't want to take the risk. As the pain got worse and worse, I flew to London. The doctors advised that I should have a cesarean as soon as possible below my keyhole surgery to remove the gallbladder. On February 3rd, 1993, my little daughter, Asifa, was born at the Portland hospital. I cuddled my adorable little baby. Although I did not know it at the time, with the birth of Asifa, my family was complete. Soon, on October 24th, 1993, the PPP was re-elected. The repetitive cycle of Pakistani politics, the second government, was democratically dismissed in 1996 and my husband, Asif, arrested. Sadly, by the time he was freed in November 2004, I was too old to have another baby. Little did I know, as we celebrated Asifa's birth, that my mother had accelerated her slow, imperceptible decline into a form of dementia which resembles Alzheimer's. Her battle with dementia can actually be traced back to the brutal wounds inflicted on her on December 16, 1977, by General Zia's thugs at Lahore when we went to watch a cricket match and were baton charged. My mother was savagely beaten and suffered major head wounds. After that, she was never quite the same, but the deterioration has become dramatic and heartbreaking. I have watched my beautiful, glamorous mother, so charming, so graceful, slowly turn frail and weak. The strong woman who battled military dictatorships and was a pioneer for women's rights now hardly recognizes anyone and cannot speak. She cannot tell me whether she is hungry or whether she has a toothache. It is heart-rending for me to see how helpless my determined mother has become, but I am blessed to have her live with me. Her mere presence gives me strength. She is a living link with my birth family, of our trials and travails, and of the bonds of love that wove us together closely, of the ups and downs we braved together, and for our sorrows and our joys. Asif's long imprisonment was painful for our family. It was difficult to have my children deny their father for the formative years of their childhood. Nothing can undo the loss, but I believe it is another example of the sexism that still pervades society. Would a wife ever be imprisoned for 8 years without evidence or conviction, held hostage to her husband's political career? Of course not, but this is something that we had to endure. Soon after his release from prison, Asif suffered a near catastrophic heart attack and was on the verge of death. Looking at the conditions in my country from the outside, I realized that the stakes in Pakistan are now higher than ever before. I am convinced that if the West continues to coddle military rulers in Pakistan who suppress liberty, a successor generation of terrorists will come after the Taliban and Al Qaeda, exploiting the name of Islam through violent confrontation with the West. It's not just Pakistanis who should care about the restoration of liberal democratic government of Pakistan. That should be the goal of all in the world who seek to avoid a clash of civilizations. As I write this in London, I must confess that my life is as difficult as it is interesting. I live from suitcase to suitcase, traveling the world, lecturing on Islam, democracy, and women's rights before universities, business associations, women's organizations, and foreign policy think tanks. I continue to pound the halls of the House of Commons and Congress. I remain the chairperson of the Pakistan People's Party. I visit my husband under medical treatment in New York. I prepare my children for their exams in Dubai, and I lead the combined democratic opposition of the secular political parties of Pakistan in fighting for free and fair elections as mandated by the Constitution of Pakistan in 2007. It may seem much too full a plate, but that is the nature of my life, and I accept it. What follows is an account of how I got to this point, with the final chapter, Prime Minister and Beyond, covering events since this autobiography was first published. I'm honored and I am blessed. God willing, I will return to my homeland and once again lead the forces of democracy in electoral battle against the entrenched power of dictators, generals, and extremists. This is my destiny, and as John F. Kennedy once said, I do not shrink from that responsibility. I welcome it. Benazir Bhutto, London, April 2007.